What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American, here today to react and learn about the civil unrest happening in the UK. So, as an American, I really have no idea exactly what's going on in the UK in terms of news and current events. But from what I understand, something is happening in the UK right now with riots or protests or whatever you want to call it. And today, I just want to learn about what exactly is going on because from here in America, it's very, very unclear to me. So I just want to check out this video and see if I can understand the situation in the UK going on right now. So let's take a look.
For the past few days, the UK has been gripped by violent anti-immigrant riots after the stabbing of 3 young girls in the northern English town of Southport.
Oh my God, what? Oh my God. The stabbing of a little girl? So, I mean, this video is calling these riots over anti-immigration, is it?
It's after the stabbing of 3 young girls in the northern English town of Southport.
Northern England? A little girl was murdered in Northern England, and that kind of spurred this whole thing. Is that right here?
For the past few days, the UK has been gripped by violent anti-immigrant riots after the stabbing of 3 young girls in the northern English town of Southport.
Wow.
Which was followed by a slew of social media posts falsely claiming the perpetrator was a Muslim asylum seeker.
Okay. See, this is a whole thing that I didn't know about, and most Americans have no idea about. That there's an immigration sort of crisis happening in the UK. It's very interesting, actually, because I can really relate to that as an American. Currently, in America, we're facing a bit of an immigration crisis, or, it's a big talking point in America, illegal immigration into the United States. I'm not exactly sure, what's going on in the UK. Are these legal immigrants? Are they illegal immigrants? Is one of them responsible for murdering a child? Obviously that's not representative of all the immigrants, but yet people are they're calling this violent rioting, according to this news source. Anyway, I understand that with news, there's a lot of you have to be very careful how you phrase things. There's a lot of bias, and I'm trying to understand, the most objective view, the most, unbiased idea of what is actually going on in the UK, if that's possible.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer quickly signalled that he would be taking a hardline stance towards the riots, warning of swift and strict sentences. At the time of writing, violence is continuing to spiral as rioters square off against counter-protesters, who have apparently also resorted to violence on at least one occasion.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around all this that's happening, because this truly, as an American, this is all brand new information to me. So there's violence happening, rioters, and there's counter-protesters? Are they protesting the rioters? Protesting the protesters? And they're also resorting to violence, and I'm not exactly sure if any of this is associated with political parties or affiliations like it is here in the United States, or I think I kind of have a picture of what's going on here, but let's keep going.
So in this video, we're going to have a look at the unrest that's currently engulfing the UK, why it's so difficult for the government, and what might happen next.
Oh my God. They are showing some pretty shocking images right now, I have to say. Stuff on fire, large crowds of people. I don't know. My first reaction, first and foremost, is that this is all pretty shocking because it's really not stuff you hear much about here in America.
Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider
Okay, yes, subscribe, yes.
videos. Anyway, caveats aside, we're going to structure this video by going through the events of the past few weeks chronologically, and then explain why it puts the government in a difficult spot.
Okay.
You might think it would be natural to start this story with the attacks we saw in Southport last week, because that's been the immediate trigger of the riots we've seen over the last couple of days.
I see. So I'm glad we're actually stepping back in time here, because I think I need the full picture. Again, I'm not here to pass judgment on all this one way or another. That's certainly not my role, especially as an American. I'm just here to understand what's going on, really, because it sounds quite fascinating. And I think as Americans, we should be aware of what's happening in the UK. There's a stabbing, which triggered a lot of this, but what happened before that?
But the UK has actually been struggling with higher than usual amounts of civil unrest for most of July.
Wow.
And this has played into the riots we've seen over the last couple of days.
Wow.
On July the 19th, riots broke out in East London between two groups of Bangladeshi men who were on different sides of the ongoing protests in Bangladesh.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so wow. This is this is actually more complicated than I even thought it would be. We're talking about Bangladesh. I'm not even sure I could tell you where Bangladesh really is even. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say, but that is just not a group of people or a culture that you really find here in the United States. So Bangladeshi men were having a fight in the UK because they come from opposite sides back in Bangladesh where there's two groups or something. Okay.
Police tried to intervene, but ended up getting caught in the crossfire, and two officers were injured. In the same day, riots broke out in Leeds after social workers and police took 4 Roma children into care. Their removal...
What? They're still not really explaining the cause of a lot of this, I don't know, chaos, you could even say. Even these pictures in Leeds, stuff is on fire. What? They're not explaining everything that's going on here. I need this in really, really simple terms, but some people were arrested in Leeds protests, okay?
Care. Their removal was resisted by both the family and the local community, and riots broke out that evening, with a bus set on fire and a police car overturned.
Wow.
There was then further unrest for the next 2 nights, and in the end, West Yorkshire Police just withdrew, claiming that their presence was actually fueling the unrest.
Huh.
Then, a couple of days later, on July the 25th, there were anti-police protests in Manchester after footage released on social media showed a police officer kicking a 19-year-old man, Mohammed Fahir, in the face and...
What? Oh my god. This is crazy. And what I mean by that is, trust me, if you're me right now, from my point of view, and you're just taking all this in for the first time, what is going on? Police in the UK, in Manchester, were stomping on kicking and stomping on a man's head at the Manchester airport, spurring more protests. What is... Hold on, I want to listen. Who was this man that they were beating up?
Showed a police officer kicking a 19-year-old man, Mohammed Fahir, in the face as he lay prone on the ground.
A man whose name is Mohammed, that makes it sound like to me, he could be an immigrant as well. Is this also, somehow based around this anti-immigration thing? Or were the police just, being, unnecessarily violent towards this man? For what reason, exactly? Anyway, maybe the reason isn't that important. Police aren't supposed to be stomping on people's heads, I'm pretty sure. And that caused more protesting. Okay.
The protest didn't turn violent, but the police were forced to barricade themselves into the station. CCTV footage released a week or so later would show that the man assaulted the police beforehand.
Ah, okay. Like, I have to be honest, I was wondering, were we going to get the full story here? The man attacked the police first, then the police retaliated, and unfortunately, it didn't end in like this, them taking him off to jail in handcuffs. Somehow it escalated to kicking him in the head, and this is very messy, very, very messy indeed.
We mention these events because many figures on the right or far right of the British political spectrum, including perhaps most notably the founder of the anti-Islam English Defence League, Tommy Robinson.
The Anti-Islam Defense League? What is this? The Anti-Islam something Defense League?
Including perhaps most notably the founder of the anti-Islam English Defence League, Tommy Robinson,
Okay.
were already complaining before the Southport attacks that this upsurge in unrest was proof that the police had, in some sense, lost control,
Yeah.
or engaging in what's sometimes called two-tier policing.
Two-tier policing. I'm a little confused here because first we were talking about immigration and an anti-immigration sentiment. Then we're talking about a girl getting stabbed. We're talking about people being arrested. Now there's this group, and now there's like this anti-police sentiment I'm hearing about. There's a lot of different like events and causes that I'm hearing about in this video. So I'm not exactly sure what we're even focusing on. What's like the main issue here? Or maybe the answer is there's just a lot of issues happening and culminating in the UK right now, which has basically like come to a boil and is just like bursting out the top right now, culminating in what we're seeing. Okay, I think that I think I kind of understand so far.
Basically, two-tier policing is a theory that the UK police treat certain groups more generously than others.
Oh.
This became a real talking point in right-wing circles after October the 7th, when various commentators argued that the police were being more lenient towards pro-Palestine protesters than the counter-protesters.
Oh, so there is definitely some controversy going on with the UK police right now. Two-tier policing. That's very scary when police and policing becomes sort of a political issue, or politically divided, you could say, if the police are indeed treating different sides of a protest differently, especially if both sides are being nonviolent and yet they're getting different treatments. Yeah, this is disturbing to hear about. This is like, wow. Two-tier policing. All right, let's keep going.
Certain commentators started claiming that the police's apparent passivity in these recent events was proof that the so-called white working class are policed especially harshly. So you get the point. Parts of the far right were already angry before the Southport attacks on July the 29th.
I see.
When a 17-year-old male killed 3 young girls between the ages of 6 and 9.
Wait, what? What? A 17-year-old man killed 3 little girls? Stabbed them to death. Am I understanding this correctly? Like, this is beyond shocking.
A 17-year-old male killed 3 young girls between the ages of 6 and 9 and stabbed 10 other people.
And stabbed 10 others. Where exactly was this? Who is this person? What was their motivation? This is very important.
Even though it later emerged that the perpetrator was born in the UK to Rwandan immigrants, a false rumour quickly started circulating online that he was a Muslim asylum seeker called Ali al-Shakati.
Okay, so some people were saying this was someone who had immigrated to the UK, a Muslim, if that matters. But in fact, it turned out that this person is a UK-born citizen who happens to have immigrant parents, sounds like.
Which was apparently started by a Russian-linked fake news website and then propagated by Russia Today, Russia's state-owned news network.
Well, immigrant or not, like, whatever. This person stabbed 3 little girls to death. So, I mean, I don't even know what you're supposed to take away from that. That's horrible.
The day after the attacks, far-right groups descended on the town and immediately attacked a mosque in the town centre.
Wow.
Again, despite the fact that the attacker had no known links to Islam, and despite the fact that their presence was opposed by most of the local community.
Right. So here the crux of this is this person murdered 3 girls, and this guy was immediately associated with Muslim immigrants to the UK, and then therefore that was all that certain groups in the UK needed to pounce and burn down a mosque. Even though this guy wasn't necessarily even linked to that by the sound of it.
As evidenced by comments by the victims' parents, who asked rioters to stop, and the vast number of locals who turned up to help rebuild the mosque the next morning.
Right. It's obviously a beyond tragic. This story is beyond tragic. Oh my goodness. And then on top of it, people are trying to take justice into their own hands. And I understand some people in the UK are angry. And, having 3 girls stabbed to death would certainly be a tipping point for a lot of people. I understand that. But, just blindly accusing, certain groups of people without having all the facts and acting rashly and then burning down a building and causing even more, distress to this community, probably not the way to go, huh?
When the police intervened, the rioters turned on them, injuring 53 officers
Wow.
and setting fire to a police van.
Wow.
These far-right riots then spread to cities across the UK,
Wow.
including London, Belfast, and Manchester.
Oh my God. See, I had no idea this was happening. And so widespread across the United Kingdom. So this is happening all over. Riots just like this, like people fighting police, stuff being burned, that kind of thing. My God.
While the number involved in these riots have so far been pretty limited, most of them had well under 1,000 people, the violence incurred has been unprecedented. A hotel housing asylum seekers in Rotherham was set alight. Nearly 100 police officers have been injured, and over 250 people have so far been arrested.
Wow.
Even politicians that you might expect to be more sympathetic to the riots have been spooked by their scale. Nigel Farage, for instance, who was accused of fueling the unrest after he suggested the state was, quote, withholding information in the aftermath of the Southport attacks, released a statement on Monday describing the violence as appalling and even floated deploying the army to reinstate the peace.
Yeah, no matter what your political affiliation, I would think everyone could mostly agree, this is not good. This is not the way. This is not a peaceful protest at this point. It clearly looks like people are destroying buildings, lighting things on fire, injuring police officers. I see, for the sake of being unbiased here, I understand certain groups in the UK want to, make their message heard, but, violence and destruction is not the way.
Worryingly, the riots have invited counter-protests. Some of these have been peaceful, but some of them, in places like Blackburn, have turned violent, which risks creating a vicious cycle, where rioters respond to violence by counter-protesters with more violence ad infinitum.
Right.
So what can the government do here? Well, in a speech on Thursday, Starmer signalled that he'd be taking a hardline stance against the protesters, promising harsh sentences, a new anti-riot police task force, and possibly criminal behaviour orders to restrict the movement of rioters, as happened with football hooligans.
Yeah, I guess this has just gotten to such a point, where it's so far... this is so far beyond anything anyone really expected in the UK, I'm guessing. With I don't know how widespread this is across the UK and how violent it's become, that everyone's basically in overdrive mode now, okay, this has to stop. The Prime Minister is basically saying this has to stop. Now, with that being said, the American in me, of course, is like, people need to have the right and the ability to protest, but peacefully protest. So, and very, very messy. It's going to be difficult for the UK to, draw the line between, okay, who's out here peacefully protesting, who's destroying things. It's probably all getting lumped together and very difficult. Yeah, the United States has had very, very, very similar types of things happen, actually, in the last, 4 or 5 years here, with this exact sort of thing. Very, very similar, actually. So I can kind of relate to this.
This is unsurprising, given Starmer oversaw the sentencing of rioters after the London riots in 2011, and it's probably the government's best chance at quelling the unrest. However, there are two caveats worth mentioning here. First, as we mentioned in our other videos, the UK genuinely doesn't have that many prison spaces left. And if the government wants to incarcerate thousands of rioters, it'll need to release other inmates. Second, if counter-protests turn violent, Starmer will have to make sure that the law is seen to be applied consistently.
Yeah.
If it's not, this will only fuel talk of two-tier policing on the right and possibly even fuel further riots.
That's exactly what I was thinking, is that if you're going to have this hard line stance against rioting and protesting, it has to be applied equally to all, not just like one group. Whoever is being violent, has to apply to them.
But even once the violence has been quelled, Starmer will still be left with a whole load of more difficult long-term questions to answer, relating to disinformation on social media, the renewed threat of the far right in the UK, the political risks of the UK's current immigration policies, and the ongoing prisons crisis.
Wow.
Keep diving deeper.
I think that's a good place to stop. Holy cow. Again, I cannot emphasize enough how shocking all of this was for me today. On the other hand, I'm very grateful to actually have learned about all this happening. I feel like I was so ignorant before watching this video of what's this is huge happening in the UK. This is important to know about. And sadly, I think a lot of Americans, myself included, we really just don't hear about this, especially in this amount of detail. So I think this was good. Nothing about this was really good news, but it was good to learn about, I suppose you could say. Yeah, again, this is just my, my reaction as an American. I don't know, I certainly am not in a position to pass any kind of judgment or make any kind of call over what is right and wrong or should be done, and especially since it's the UK, and, this is just my sort of ignorant, reaction to the facts presented before me. Anyway, I did enjoy this. If you enjoyed this as well, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on the civil unrest happening in the UK, anything I didn't quite understand, or anything that I am getting wrong here. You won't hurt my feelings. I am certainly, I might not understand exactly what is happening here, but my goodness, that'd be interesting to hear about. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to the UK and UK culture, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.